Let me be direct with you from the outset because we are now in uncharted territory. 72 hours ago, on May 13th at 11 p.m. Tehran time, the Iranian Supreme National Security Council issued a statement through official channels that has received almost no attention in Western media, but has been the subject of intense analysis in regional capitals and defense ministries across the Middle East. The statement, attributed to Secretary Ali Shamkhani and endorsed by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, gave Israel a 72-hour window to cease all military operations in Lebanon, withdraw air assets from Lebanese airspace, and commit publicly to respecting Lebanese territorial sovereignty. The statement explicitly warned that failure to comply would result in, and I am quoting the official Persian text directly here, comprehensive defensive measures across multiple theaters to protect the resistance and the sovereignty of Lebanon. That 72-hour deadline expired 14 minutes ago. Israel has not withdrawn from Lebanese airspace. Israeli strikes on targets in southern Lebanon continued as recently as 4 hours ago. The Israeli government has not issued any public statement acknowledging the Iranian ultimatum, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated yesterday in a cabinet meeting, according to leaks reported by Israeli media, that Israel does not respond to threats from Tehran and will continue to defend itself against Hezbollah infrastructure regardless of Iranian warnings. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly what Iran's 72-hour ultimatum actually said and what it legally and strategically commits Iran to do now that the deadline has passed, what military capabilities Iran has positioned over the past 3 days in preparation for potential action, what targets Iran is most likely to strike if it follows through on its warning, why this ultimatum represents a fundamental escalation in Iran's willingness to directly confront Israel, and what options remain for de-escalation now that we are in the post-deadline period. This is time-sensitive analysis. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being discussed in emergency sessions at the Pentagon, the Israeli Defense Ministry, and allied capitals right now. Let's start with the exact text of the Iranian ultimatum because the language matters and reveals Iran's legal strategy and operational intentions. The May 13th statement begins by citing United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, which ended the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah war and established a ceasefire requiring Israel to respect Lebanese sovereignty and airspace. The statement notes that Israel has violated Lebanese airspace more than 22,000 times since 2006, according to documentation by the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, and has conducted hundreds of airstrikes on Lebanese territory in violation of international law and Lebanese sovereignty. The statement then invokes Article 51 of the UN Charter, which recognizes the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations. Iran's legal argument, laid out explicitly in the statement, is that Israel's ongoing military operations in Lebanon constitute armed aggression against a sovereign state, that Lebanon has the right to defend itself, that Lebanon's defense capabilities have been degraded by Israeli strikes, and that Iran, as a regional power committed to supporting the resistance against occupation, has the legal right under principles of collective self-defense to assist Lebanon in defending its sovereignty. This is critical because Iran is not framing this as aggression. Iran is framing this as collective self-defense in support of Lebanon, anchored in UN Charter provisions and customary international law. Whether that legal argument holds up to scrutiny is debatable, but the fact that Iran is making the argument reveals strategic intent to justify potential military action as defensive rather than offensive. According to Article 2, Section 3 of the ultimatum, Iran demanded that Israel cease all violations of Lebanese airspace within 72 hours, withdraw all reconnaissance and strike aircraft from Lebanese territory, and issue a public commitment to respect Resolution 1701 going forward. The ultimatum stated that compliance would be verified through monitoring by the Lebanese Armed Forces and the United Nations. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of detail from CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News. Now let's talk about what Iran has actually done in the 72 hours since issuing this ultimatum and what the military preparations suggest about potential follow-through. Announcement number 1, Iran has repositioned significant ballistic missile and air defense assets to forward positions in western Iran and has activated command and control infrastructure consistent with preparation for strike operations. And this one matters more than anything else because these are not routine movements. These are deliberate preparations for potential conflict. According to satellite imagery analysis conducted by ImageSat International and confirmed by regional defense sources, Iran has moved at least 12 transporter-erector launchers carrying Imad and Ghadr medium-range ballistic missiles to positions in Kermanshah and Hamadan provinces, both within 500 kilometers of Israeli territory. These missiles have ranges between 1,600 and 2,000 kilometers, sufficient to reach any target in Israel. The TELs have been positioned in hardened shelters and dispersed locations to reduce vulnerability to Israeli preemptive strikes. Iran has also activated at least 6 early warning radar installations along its western border and has positioned Bavar 373 and Khordad 15 air defense systems to provide coverage of likely flight paths for Israeli strike aircraft. According to analysis of the deployment patterns, this is a layered defensive and offensive posture designed to deter Israeli preemption while maintaining the capability to conduct strikes if the decision is made. The other significant indicator is naval activity. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has deployed at least 9 Ghadar-class submarines to the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman over the past 48 hours, according to vessel tracking data and reports from maritime security firms. These submarines are small, diesel-electric vessels optimized for operations in shallow water. They are difficult to detect and can deploy mines, launch torpedoes, or conduct surveillance. Their deployment in this numbers is unusual and suggests preparation for potential operations to interdict shipping or threaten naval assets if broader conflict erupts. What this tells us is that Iran is not bluffing. They have positioned military assets consistent with their stated intention to respond if Israel does not comply. Whether they will actually use those assets is a separate question, but the capability is in place and the operational posture is active. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, Hezbollah in Lebanon has issued its own statement coordinating with the Iranian position and warning of escalated operations if Israeli strikes continue. This is the part that reveals the coordination between Tehran and its Lebanese ally and suggests that Iranian action, if it occurs, will likely be synchronized with Hezbollah escalation. On May 15th, approximately 48 hours into the Iranian ultimatum period, Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah delivered a televised address in which he stated that Hezbollah's patience with Israeli aggression is not unlimited, that the resistance has capabilities that have not yet been employed, and that decisions about escalation will be made in coordination with allies, a clear reference to Iran. The statement was notable for its restraint. Nasrallah did not threaten immediate action, did not announce new operations, but he established a clear link between Hezbollah's decision-making and the Iranian ultimatum timeline. According to analysis by regional security experts, this suggests a coordinated strategy where Iran and Hezbollah are operating on the same decision cycle, likely planning synchronized actions if the ultimatum deadline passes without Israeli compliance. Stay with me because this is where the operational picture becomes very complex and where the potential for miscalculation and unintended escalation becomes extremely high. If Iran strikes Israeli targets and Hezbollah simultaneously launches major rocket and missile barrages from Lebanon, Israel faces a two-front crisis. Israeli air defenses would need to simultaneously counter Iranian ballistic missiles from the east and Hezbollah rockets from the north, potentially overwhelming interception capacity and allowing some projectiles to reach their targets. This is deliberate strategic coordination designed to maximize the effectiveness of any Iranian action. According to the Times of Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces have activated additional Iron Dome batteries and repositioned David's sling and arrow interceptors to provide redundant coverage of central Israel and strategic sites. Israeli Northern Command has reinforced positions along the Lebanese border and has conducted evacuation drills in communities within 5 kilometers of the frontier. These are defensive preparations for a scenario where both Iran and Hezbollah escalate simultaneously. Announcement number 3, and this one almost nobody is connecting correctly, the United States has privately communicated to Iran through Swiss diplomatic channels that Washington will not support Israeli preemptive strikes on Iranian territory, but will defend Israel if Iran attacks first. This revelation, reported by the Wall Street Journal, citing American officials familiar with the communications, reveals the complexity of the American position. The United States is trying to restrain both sides while maintaining alliance commitments, a nearly impossible balancing act. The American message to Iran, as reported, stated that the United States recognizes Iranian concerns about Israeli operations in Lebanon, but does not accept the legal justification for Iranian military action under collective self-defense. The message reportedly urged Iran to pursue diplomatic channels through the United Nations rather than military action and warned that any Iranian strikes on Israeli territory would be met with American defensive support, including potential use of American air defense systems based in the region and possible American strikes on Iranian missile launchers to prevent follow-on attacks. The American message to Israel, according to the same reporting, urged restraint on operations in Lebanon, encouraged coordination with the Lebanese armed forces rather than unilateral strikes, and advised against preemptive strikes on Iranian missile sites, which could trigger the very escalation that the United States is trying to prevent. What this tells us is that Washington is desperately trying to prevent this from spiraling into wider war, but has very limited leverage over either side. Israel does not want to appear to be yielding to Iranian threats. Iran cannot back down from its ultimatum without losing credibility. The result is that both sides are locked into positions that make de-escalation very difficult. And the United States, despite being the most powerful actor in the region, cannot force either side to change course. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the official statements because there are several dynamics at play that the headlines are completely missing. The first dynamic is the internal Iranian calculation. Why did Iran issue this ultimatum now? Iranian military operations against Israel have historically been conducted through proxies, primarily Hezbollah, Hamas, and militias in Iraq and Syria. Direct Iranian military action against Israeli territory has been extremely rare. The decision to issue a 72-hour ultimatum represents a significant shift in Iranian willingness to directly confront Israel. The reasons for this shift are multiple. First, Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, weapons shipments, and IRGC commanders have intensified over the past 6 months, and Iran has concluded that continued restraint is being interpreted as weakness. Second, Hezbollah has been significantly degraded by Israeli strikes on its infrastructure and leadership, and Iran may believe that Hezbollah requires direct Iranian support to maintain credible deterrence. Third, Iran has developed new military capabilities including hypersonic missiles and advanced air defenses that reduce the risk of Israeli retaliation, making direct action less costly than it would have been 5 years ago. The second dynamic is the Israeli domestic political situation. Netanyahu faces enormous pressure from his coalition partners, particularly from far-right parties that demand aggressive action against Iran and Hezbollah. Yielding to an Iranian ultimatum, withdrawing from Lebanese airspace, publicly committing to respect Lebanese sovereignty, all of these would be portrayed by Netanyahu's political opponents as capitulation. Netanyahu's political survival depends on maintaining his image as the defender of Israeli security who stands firm against threats. That political reality makes it almost impossible for him to comply with Iranian demands, even if his security advisors might counsel that de-escalation serves Israeli interests. The third dynamic is the regional context. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other Gulf states have invested heavily in détente with Iran over the past 2 years, re-establishing diplomatic relations and pursuing economic cooperation. A major Iran-Israel confrontation threatens to unravel that progress and force Gulf states to choose sides. Saudi Arabia in particular has worked to position itself as a neutral mediator and a stabilizing force. An Iran-Israel war would likely pressure Saudi Arabia to either support Israel, damaging relations with Iran and risking Iranian retaliation, or remain neutral, damaging relations with the United States and Israel. Neither option is attractive to Riyadh. If you follow energy markets, if you invest in regional stability, if you analyze geopolitical risk, what happens in the next 24 to 48 hours will have immediate effects on oil prices, shipping insurance rates, defense contractor stocks, and the strategic calculations of every government in the region. These effects are not speculative. These are real market forces responding to real military threats. Let's address the human element here because behind these strategic calculations are real people facing real danger. Israeli civilians in Haifa, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem are going about their daily lives while their government faces an ultimatum that could result in missile strikes on their cities. Iranian civilians in Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz are also going about their lives while their government has positioned itself for potential conflict that could bring Israeli retaliation. Lebanese civilians in Beirut and southern Lebanon are caught between Hezbollah and Israel, with no control over decisions that could turn their cities into battlefields again. All of these populations want security, want stability, want to live their lives without fear of war. But their governments are locked in strategic competitions where backing down is seen as weakness and where escalation is seen as necessary for deterrence. That is the tragedy of this situation. Rational actors making rational decisions based on their understanding of strategic logic, and the cumulative effect of all those rational decisions is irrational escalation that harms everyone. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same unless someone breaks the cycle. In August 1914, European powers found themselves in a crisis following the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Each power made decisions that seemed rational based on their alliances and strategic commitments. Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia. Russia mobilized to support Serbia. Germany mobilized to support Austria-Hungary. France mobilized to support Russia. Each step seemed necessary, each step was justified by existing commitments, and the cumulative effect was World War I, a catastrophic conflict that killed 20 million people and destroyed multiple empires. The parallel is not exact, but the dynamic is the same. Ultimatums create deadlines. Deadlines create pressure. Pressure creates hasty decisions. Hasty decisions in crisis often lead to war. So where does this leave us now that the deadline has expired? Let me give you 3 clear paths because the next 24 to 48 hours will determine which direction this crisis goes. Path 1. Iran does not immediately follow through on its threat, instead issuing another statement declaring that it reserves the right to respond at a time and place of its choosing. This allows Iran to save face by not backing down explicitly while also not committing to immediate action. It extends the crisis period but provides more time for diplomacy. Israel continues operations in Lebanon but possibly at reduced intensity to signal willingness to de-escalate without explicitly yielding to Iranian demands. The United States mediates back-channel communications toward an informal understanding. Likelihood assessment, 35 to 40%. This is the hope. Path 2. Iran conducts limited strikes on Israeli military targets, possibly air bases used for strikes on Lebanon or intelligence facilities, framing the action as proportional response and collective self-defense. Israel retaliates against Iranian missile sites and possibly nuclear facilities. Hezbollah launches rocket barrages in coordination with Iranian strikes. We see several days of intense military exchange before international pressure and mutual exhaustion lead to a ceasefire. Casualties in the hundreds or thousands, significant infrastructure damage, regional economic disruption, but the conflict remains contained and does not expand to full-scale war. Likelihood assessment, 30 to 35%. Path 3, Iran conducts major strikes on multiple Israeli targets. Israel responds with comprehensive attacks on Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure. Hezbollah enters the war fully, and we see a regional conflict involving Iran, Israel, Hezbollah, possibly Syrian and Iraqi militias, and potentially American forces defending Israel. This scenario produces mass casualties, potential closure of the Strait of Hormuz, global oil shock, and risk of further escalation, including potential use of weapons of mass destruction if either side faces existential threat. Likelihood assessment, 15 to 25%, lower probability but catastrophic consequences if it occurs. I think we are most likely looking at path 1 in the immediate term, with very real risk of moving to path 2 if either side miscalculates or if an incident occurs that forces their hand. The fact that the deadline has now expired and there are no immediate reports of Iranian strikes suggests that Iran may be pausing to assess whether there is any indication of Israeli willingness to de-escalate before committing to military action. But every hour that passes increases uncertainty and tension. Here are the questions I want you to take away. Does Iran have domestic political room to back away from its ultimatum without losing credibility, or has the deadline commitment locked them into action? Can Israel afford to reduce operations in Lebanon even temporarily to signal de-escalation, or does that invite Hezbollah attacks? Is there any realistic diplomatic off-ramp that allows both sides to step back while claiming they defended their interests? Tell me in the comments what you think happens next. Tell me if you think Iran will strike or if you believe this ultimatum was a bluff designed for domestic and regional audiences. We will keep tracking every development in this crisis minute by minute, every movement of military forces, every diplomatic communication, every statement from Tehran and Jerusalem. That is what this analysis does in real time. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who needs to understand the gravity of this moment. Turn on notifications because the situation is evolving hour by hour, and the next update could come at any moment. We will see you in the next analysis.